Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Watch Club. It's October 2023. I am James Sullivan, the program director for the Newburyport Documentary Film Festival, and we are very pleased and honored to have with us tonight veteran and multi-awarded documentary filmmaker Stanley Nelson with his film Sound of the Police, which is streaming now on Hulu. Hopefully, some of you who are watching this have already watched it. If you have not, I highly recommend it. It's a powerful film about the fraught relationship between the African-American community and the policing community. For those of you who maybe haven't watched it or watched it when it first came out a month or so ago and want to refresh your memory, let's take a quick look at the trailer, and then I will welcome Stanley Nelson to the screen.
Imagine if you had an institution where it was almost impossible to be held accountable.
What happened with the police made me scared of them.
No mother should have to bury their child.
Amir Locke was killed in a botched no-knock warrant situation.
I saw the body cam footage. He's snuffing this man out as he slept. Now we stand here dealing with another murder of a young black man.
How these cops operate in this country has been America's dirty secret.
We're in a country of fearing black people, rooted all the way back into slavery.
There seems to be two forms of policing in America. One for white America and another for black America.
As a young police officer, you begin to paint the community a certain way. You don't even realize it before you're actually acting upon it.
The officer has the right to arrest, and if you fight back, they put a hole in your chest.
Black people were accused falsely of things. They were randomly picked up. They were subject to police brutality.
That's the sound of the police.
We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty.
Not guilty. Enough is enough.
The police kill 1,100 people a year. The highest number of convictions ever is 11 people.
I can't FaceTime with my son, but can that officer still FaceTime with his? All I have is memories.
That's the sound of the police.
The camera took the veil off of the brutality that people were facing.
That's the sound of the police.
I think about Amir every day. Because of the color of his skin, he didn't have a chance.
He was someone's son. He was my son.
That's the sound of the police.
Stanley Nelson, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks for being with us. You have had a pretty remarkable career in filmmaking. And this seems like not that it's going to be your last film, but it seems like a culmination of sorts. You've, obviously covered the African-American community extensively, among other subjects. 3-time Emmy Award winner, right? National Humanities Medal recipient, MacArthur Fellow. And your films have been on subjects ranging from the Black Panthers to the Freedom Riders, the murder of Emmett Till. I guess I'll ask you, for starters, something that maybe others have asked you. This is a subject that I wonder if there was a moment where you said, okay, I've had this film in the back of my mind. Now it needs to be the next one that I do. Was there a sort of tipping point? Obviously, there were plenty of tipping points of incidents over the last decade or so that we all saw and witnessed. But was there a moment where you said, okay, this has to be my next film?
I think strangely, it wasn't a moment. It was kind of like, tick, 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 especially over the last decade,
right.
That we saw the violence, that so often was perpetrated on African Americans, just continue and get ratcheted up and continue. And I also think that, we understood that the public would understand the film now in a way that they might not have 10 years ago. that it would be very hard for anybody to say that there's not at least a problem with the African American community and the police, and so that we could make this film, which is the film kind of lays it out there in a way that so many times the dots haven't been connected before.
And one of the major things that the film does, I think, is really makes it clear. I mean, we've all known, anybody who pays attention to the news has known this for a while now, but from the Rodney King beating, which was 30 years ago now, but then especially in the last decade or 15 years when everybody's holding a cell phone in their hands.
Right.
These incidents, whereas they have never stopped occurring, we all are witness to them now because of the prevalence of cell phones and the kind of amazing story that the one historian says, or no, the guy from the TV stations in LA says that the guy who filmed the Rodney King beating, he had just gotten his camera as a gift, right, from his wife, and that was the first thing he shot.
Yeah.
Looked out his window, heard a commotion, and shot that film, right?
Yeah, and I think he calls the police, I think, first, and says he's got this footage, and they like, so what? And so then he calls his TV station that he watches and says, I got this footage, and just as kind of miraculous happening, the guy he talks to said, oh yeah, well, let me see the footage, and then they decided they're just going to put it on, as it happened. They're not going to edit it, they're just going to lay it out there, and so that became Rodney King. But I think one of the things that we wanted to do in the film, and that hopefully the film does well, is also to tell the history. Say that the problems with the police didn't start at George Floyd. It didn't start at Rodney King. It didn't start at the Black Panthers. It didn't start at the Tulsa riots. It was baked into the cake. That was kind of the term that we used. In the edit room. That it's baked into the cake in the United States. In many ways, the first real police in the United States, were in the South, and they were slave catchers. And the police have never, it's not like the police have gone bad. They've never been there to protect and serve the African American community in the same way that they protect and serve the white community. And we wanted to, we thought that people didn't really connect the dots in that history, and hopefully the film could help them.
I'm just going to take a quick second to say that anyone who's watching right now who wants to pose a question of Mr. Nelson, you're welcome to go ahead and just type your question into the chat. And if I haven't already asked it, we will pose it of him. And I will also mention that I think that one of the members of the viewing audience at the moment is Tom Phillips, who has done the soundtrack music for several of your films, right? And he knows that we're streaming live right now. So I think, is he a Boston or Boston area resident? Is that right?
Yeah, he is. Boston area. Yeah.
The film obviously has a powerful soundtrack, both Tom's the composed soundtrack and the music selections that you chose. I guess you just told me, right? Obviously it's named after the KRS-One song, right? Sound of the Police. But do you want to talk a little bit about why? I was actually struck by the Little Baby song. I don't know how many of our documentary film watchers are going to know what I'm talking about, but my kids love Little Baby, and it's a powerful song, right?
Yeah. I mean, and one of the things with using hip hop is, it's always a risk. Will you get permission from the artist, and can you even get to the artist to get permission? We had a great music researcher, and when she said that the Little Baby song came in, and KRS and others, we're just overjoyed, because we think it's really a big part of the film to use that music. And also hip hop artists more than any others are actually confronting the police in the music and talking about the police and the way the African American community so many times sees the police. So that was really essential. That we use. We use a bunch of hip hop in the film, and I think it's really great that we were able to. But also, I want to talk about the composed music that Tom Phillips did, because I think he did a masterful job. Because one of the things that we realized early on was that like the scenes in the film are so dramatic. There's so many scenes of confrontations, of beatings, of other police misconduct. And that we needed music, but we couldn't have it go over the top, because it was almost like the visuals are already almost over the top. And so if the music was too much, was too over dramatic, it would have seemed like we were forcing something down your throat. And when we worked really hard to just have the music just be the wind at the back of the film, and just kind of help you, but not go over the top.
Right. And so I was going to ask you, you're kind of just answered it a little bit, but I was going to ask you about structurally, how you structured the film. Obviously, it's packed with disturbing and upsetting images of, incidents that the film is about, obviously. But it also felt to me by the end of the hour and a half like the film had somehow built in tension. I mean, you open with the death of a young man who who was killed during a confrontation with the police. So it's hard hitting right from the beginning. But by the end of the hour and a half, I felt like it had built, like the tension had continued to build. And I wonder if that's just an accumulation, or if you had sort of actually structured the film that way to feel like it keeps intensifying.
Well, one of the things that's really interesting is the way we pitched the film, and the way the film was structured was that we pitched the film that we would build it around a police shooting. That and how we pitched this to ABC is that we can start the film. The film is kind of half historical, right? And half in the present day. And we can start the film, and we can start researching the historical and the footage and all like that. And keep our eyes open for a police incident. And sadly, the way we pitched it was, and we know something will happen. And we know something will happen. And so we started the film, and then Amir Locke was killed in Minneapolis. And so, our crew went down there, and got there like 2 days later, and we went to his funeral, and that's how the film starts, with the funeral of Amir Locke, who was killed by the police. The other thing that we knew is that we had to talk about kind of multiple incidents that if we show, so there's a section when we talk about, police treatment of African American kids, like kids, like 6-year-olds and teenagers and stuff. And we knew if we just showed you, a 6-year-old girl being arrested, as we do, and then didn't do anything else, you could say, oh, well, that was just a bad cop. Or an idiot cop on a bad day. But we had to build it and construct it so that you saw over and over again, and you can't sit there and say, oh, it's just a cop with a bad day. And in the same way, we wanted to build the film and build the case, and we end the film by going back to Amir Locke's parents a year later after his funeral.
Right.
And they're just amazing, and they're amazingly brave to talk to us, and you get the sense, that this is a real human being, and the loss of their son, who was never coming back, as his mother says.
Right. Are they active now? Like, do so many of the parents, unfortunately, feel like, okay, I at least found my purpose. Like my son was killed, or my daughter was killed, which is horrendous, but so many of them become activists about this kind of thing. And are they among that group?
Yeah, they are. They're active. They're outspoken, about it. And I think that for so many parents, it's kind of like the only thing they can do, for their child, not death, not to totally be in vain, not to just be of no consequence, is to use that platform to speak out.
But you also talked to some members of law enforcement, obviously a bunch of historians, maybe several of whom are white historians, right?
Mhm.
The law enforcement officers or former law enforcement officers, I think in a couple of cases, they kind of, they make it very clear that this is a systematic thing. It is about
Mhm.
systemic racism and not necessarily, a couple of the interviewees say, I'm not against all cops. There are good cops. Of course, there are good cops, but cops have also been trained to contain the African American community for 150 years, basically, right?
Mhm.
So that that's another that's probably like sort of a delicate dance that you had to do as filmmakers and editors, right? Your team, to make it very clear that that's what that's what the film is saying, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the word on the head. It's systemic, and
Mm.
that's what we had to show, and so that you can't feel, it's a couple of bad cops, and
Yeah.
and that it's the system, and we were very careful that we couldn't in this film that is what it is in an hour and a half, talk about how this thing needs to be changed.
Mhm.
There's a lot of different ideas, from abolish the police
Yeah.
to defund the police to, just you shift some of the money to social
Right.
work to, so many other things. But our attitude was that we wanted for you coming out of the film to understand that something needs to change,
Mhm.
that this thing is not working, and it's not working for the African American community, which means it's not working for the white community,
Right.
and it's also not working for the police. And
Right.
so something needs to change, and the sooner we're brave enough to say that,
Mhm.
the sooner we can start to some kind of meaningful change, and some kind of meaningful making a difference, in this country.
People were really quick to, you know, slap back at the idea of quote unquote defunding the police, which we heard during at the height of the Black Lives Matter movement.
Mhm.
But the activist D. Ray McKesson, who's in your film, what he says in the film seems incredibly smart to me. I've taken it upon himself to start calling the police guy with a gun, meaning that, um, do we need the guy with the gun to come get the cat out of the tree? Do we need the guy with the gun to come make sure that, what some other, minor thing, like, no, we don't, they don't have to respond to every single incident. And the prevalence of the guns is the problem. Right. So
Right.
I think the way that he explains that and kind of says that's the way he's taken to describing it is incredibly helpful.
Yeah, yeah. I'm in New York City, and like in,
Mm.
in most cities, most towns in this country, we have nothing else but the police.
Yep.
I mean, there's
Right.
it's not like you could call up and get a social worker
Right.
or somebody else because somebody's a cat's in a tree, or somebody's
Homeless guy needs help or
yeah,
whatever. Yeah. Right.
homeless guy, yeah. There's nobody else to call. I mean,
Mhm.
and so you have to call the police, and I'd assume it's incredibly frustrating for the police,
Yep.
and that's not what they're equipped to do.
Right.
Again, like you say, they're the guy with the gun.
Yeah.
That's what they are.
Right. Yeah. Would you mind kind of talking me for a minute through your catalog of films and where you see, like, again, I mentioned a few of them at the beginning, but there's a bunch. You've done, I don't know, what, 15 films or something at this
Yeah,
point or
yeah.
more.
I'm old.
But but so some are about subjects that are not about the African American community, but there's definitely a thread running through your films. How do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, we run an organization, Firelight Media, besides, the production company, Firelight
Yep.
Films, and
Mhm.
we deal with filmmakers of color, BIPOC filmmakers, all over the country. And one of the things that we believe in, and we're very clear about this, is that people should tell their own story. And I believe that. I believe that when people tell their own story, it's so much deeper than you parachuting into my community and trying to tell my story. And so the vast majority of my films are about the African American experience. I kind of started out, my first film was called $2 in a Dream, about Madam C.J. and Alelia Walker, the first. Madam C.J. Walker is in the Guinness Book of Records as the first woman of any color in the world to start with nothing and earn $1 million. And she earned $1 million through a cosmetic company that she had.
Well, I was going to ask you about your family That's family, right?
Yeah. So my grandfather was her partner, business partner, and attorney. And it's just that I happened to go into filmmaking, and silly me, it took me like 8 years or so of being a filmmaker to say, wait a minute, there's a great story right here in my family. So that was my first film, and that kind of got me into making films about African American history and got me on that path. And I found in making that film that I really liked it. I mean, crazy as it may seem, I liked going to the library and looking through old microfilm. I love, reading a paper from 1918, a black paper from 1918. I don't know. It just was fascinating to me. I like looking at old pictures. And so, and so that I made a lot of films, not enough, but a lot of films on African American history.
Yeah. And there's a lot of amazing footage, old portraits from, 100 plus years ago. I actually thought that some of the Rodney King, I mean, it's not that long ago, it's 30 years ago, but I thought some of the riot, subsequent riot footage that you had, I don't know that I like, did you kind of dig that stuff up? I mean, it seemed like that seemed fresh to me.
Yeah, we dug up. I mean, we had to dig, especially for things like Rodney King that people know, to kind of a fresh angle on it.
Exactly. And you definitely did a good job with that. So, I appreciated it. Do you? I know what I wanted to ask you. I believe. I didn't know this until I was kind of getting ready to talk to you. Your sister is, what is she? She's an educator and an author. Is that right?
She's a writer. Yeah. Jill Nelson. Yeah. She's a writer.
So the question that I have for you is that it just occurred to me, I'm familiar with her book about Martha's Vineyard. But I didn't realize the connection that, that was your sister until I was looking at, stuff about you. So she wrote a book about the Black history on the vineyard, right? Did your family spend time on the vineyard?
Yeah. My family's been going to Martha's Vineyard since I was 6 years old. So that's, over 65 years now. Pretty much, every summer.
Do you have a family home in Oak Bluffs?
Yeah, we have a family home in Oak Bluffs. People have to understand that when my father bought the house that we have, 55 years ago, Martha's Vineyard was something very different than it is now.
Yeah.
I remember that the first house we ever stayed in, we rented and they offered it to us for $4,000.
Yeah.
When the summer was over, and my father didn't buy it.
But
funny story though, that my wife's family bought the house, and so my wife also grew up on Martha's Vineyard.
Before you met your wife?
Yes.
That's pretty amazing. So you had visited as a kid.
We stayed in the whole summer in the house that her family now still owns. Yeah.
And are you still going to, spending time in the summer?
Yeah. So we kind of split time because her family owns a house, my family owns a house. So my wife and I own part of two. We own part of two houses. So
very nice.
We spend time kind of in both houses.
Yeah. Oh, that's fun. Um, okay, so what has let's wrap it up in a minute with a little more about the current film, obviously, Sound of the Police. I'm curious to hear what kinds of responses you've gotten. There are still, every time one of these incidents unfortunately happens, we still hear from folks who say, well, that was, like you said earlier, well, that was a bad cop. It's not about the system. It's not about how they're trained to police. That was just a bad guy. And what kind, and we've already talked quite a bit about how you sort of nuanced this story with this film. What's the response been like so far?
The response has been great. I mean, I kind of steel myself, for people who might, say, well, yeah, the film is one-sided or this or that. But I've gotten none of that at all. We've gotten just great responses. We kind of always were looking over our shoulder at what ABC, Hulu would say about the film, and they've been incredibly supportive and really aired the film and airs the film as we made it. We didn't have to make any changes. They've been incredible. So the response has been great. I kind of got ready for people to say, because I mean, it's kind of a knee-jerk reaction to kind of defend the police. And one of the things that is fun in the film, and something I really like, is we fast cut the intro to cop shows, like and there's like we use like 100 cop shows in like 60 seconds, and you see, how many cop shows have been on TV, since the 60s and the 50s. And, it's just, kind of, mind blowing, but also brainwashing.
Yeah, it's a heavy, your film is obviously a heavy subject, but that is a light moment. I was thinking, what are you going to say? Like, what's a fun moment in your film? But you're right, that is a fun moment, but it serves a very clear point too, which is that we've all been brainwashed to believe that the cops are there to do the right thing all the time. Right. And clearly, especially since the prevalence of cell phones, as we said earlier, we've been witness to the fact that that's unfortunately not always the case.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's happened is that even African Americans, have realized that they have to give their sons and daughters the talk,
yeah.
And maybe we didn't realize that so much that it was was kind of a private thing. But now it's something that's real, that African Americans all, pretty much have to give their son, hey, I told my son when he was like 14, or 15, like, look, if you see the police coming towards you, and, you can cross the street, without being suspicious, it's probably better if you just cross the street.
Right.
No good.
Avoid that confrontation. Exactly right.
From that confrontation. Yeah.
Right. How old are your kids now?
I have 24-year-old twins and a 33-year-old daughter.
Do you have any grandchildren yet?
No. I would love to have some, but I want my kids to be. I want my, like for all of us who have kids. All of us who have kids know that it's no joke. Well, so I want my kids to be ready.
You can't rush them, that's for sure, right? I think we're good. Thank you so much for spending the time talking to us. A real pleasure, and thanks for your honest and striking piece of work here. So, folks, it's on Hulu. If you've seen it and have seen this interview and want to tell your friends, check out the film Sound of the Police, streaming on Hulu. Absolutely well worth your time. And thanks again, Mr. Nelson, for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
We'll just take a brief moment to say thank you to our sponsors, as always, and we'll see you next month in the Watch Club.